In this video, we're going to talk about penetration testing. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is the definition. What is penetration testing? We can think of pen testing in terms of two different things. The first one is its role in terms of verifying security controls against policies. So you have these security policies. However, until you actually test whether appropriate controls or countermeasures have been implemented faithfully based on the policies, you don't really know whether you're enforcing the policies in the best possible way. Another thing that is reviewed during your penetration testing is, of course, whether you have any other vulnerabilities that are not covered by your security policies. So in addition to what your security policy is talking about, this penetration testing allows you to look at your system again to reveal any unknown vulnerabilities that is not or that are not covered by your security policies. Therefore, the revelation of new vulnerabilities is another goal of a penetration testing exercise. So there are multiple tasks expected in a typical penetration testing. The very first one is black box testing, meaning you try to attack the system in question from outside the organization's perimeter. So that's why it's called black box testing, because you're not expected to see the internals of the system you're trying to attack. The second approach is white box testing. So this time you're attacking the system being tested from behind the organization's perimeters or within the organization's perimeter. So in this case, some of the system details, or maybe all of the system details, including things like user credentials, are transparent to the penetration testers or white team members. Another thing a pen testing team could try to do is social engineering, because a lot of times these attacks occur through social engineering techniques. And finally, one thing you shouldn't forget is your information system security can be breached also by exploiting physical security vulnerabilities in your organization. So physical security audits, they play an important role in penetration testing exercise too. So in general, we can say that the things you should do as a penetration tester is to sort of simulate these attacks that could be launched by potential attackers. But when you do these simulated attacks, you should be very careful not to actually damage the organization's systems you're testing. So now let's talk about some of the terms and conditions associated with penetration testing. We can think of these from two different perspectives. One is, of course, the pen tester perspective, and the other is the user perspective. So from the pen tester perspective, I think the most important thing is not to get into any trouble. So it's always important to get sort of a written consent that says pen testing is really what the organization is intending to do, and they are hiring you as a pen tester, and some of the consequences that could arise as a result of your pen testing, the organization is already aware of. So that's really important, especially for the pen testers. From the user perspective, I think it's important for you to understand exactly what's going to happen. So that's why having a set of very well-defined procedures provided by the pen testers ahead of time is also very important. And whatever they do, I mean, unless they document the information, you won't know it. So asking for documenting everything done during your pen testing exercise is very important. And then another one is this set of rules of engagement, especially between the pen testing group and the organization, how they will be interacting with each other, what kind of means they'll be using to get in touch with each other, and so on, so that to avoid any potential problems in terms of communication. And finally, it's important to clearly define the pen tester code of conduct, because while pen testing, they could be doing something malicious, although that could be really rare, and your organization's information gets exposed to these pen testers, so they may be stealing the information, and they may be sharing the information, or they may be spreading some rumors about your company. So it's very important for you to make sure the integrity of the pen testers who will have unprecedented access to your organization's resources. So to formalize these mutual agreements between the pen testing group and the organization being tested, it's important to maintain some legal documents. So the most obvious one is, of course, something called SLA, or Service Level Agreement, that lays out exactly what to expect from each side. Another one is non-disclosure agreement. So by signing this agreement, the pen testers are not allowed to share any information they have access to during their pen testing exercise. And finally, this is probably for mainly the pen testers, but liability releases. So by getting these releases, in case something undesirable happens during the pen testing process, the pen testers are not going to be liable to any legal consequences. There are many pen testing tools available out there for both professionals and amateurs. A lot of times these tools are packaged into a suite of software applications. One of the most well-known ones is something called Backtrack, and then there's another one called Kali. So it would be really nice if you could look into these software bundles and try to get used to these, especially if you're interested in working as a pen tester in the future. Usually these software suites, they are coming out in the form of Linux distributions. So all you have to do is get an ISO image of these Linux distributions and burn them into CDs or DVDs, or even USB drives, and you can boot from those media, and basically you have a dedicated environment for your pen testing exercises. So at the end of your pen testing process, it's crucial to produce a very thorough report, and that's one of the rights of the customers who originally initiated this pen testing exercise. So in the report, of course, you want an executive summary, and the report should go over the objectives of your pen testing, mainly from the perspective of the users, and then the report should summarize findings and their analysis. So what was exactly revealed during the pen testing process. And then if they claim certain findings, they have to be based on some solid evidence. And then the report should also talk about all the actions taken during the pen testing process and their results. So ideally, what could be done is after the pen testing is over, you could go back and undo all these changes pen testing created. And finally, a prioritized list of remediation measures. So meaning basically the recommendations the pen testers are providing to the customers, saying that in order for you to fix some of these vulnerabilities found during the pen testing process, you have to do such and such. So this will be probably the most valuable thing coming out of your pen testing exercise. Finally, I'd like to mention some things to remember in pen testing. The first point is regarding timing. Just doing one pen testing exercise is not enough. It really has to be done periodically throughout a system development life cycle. So you want to do it over and over again just to make sure, of course, you're fixing all these security issues and making sure also that nothing new in terms of vulnerabilities is showing up. Another thing to remember is pen testing presents its own risks, because during the pen testing process you might actually have some system outages because you're actually attacking your system while pen testing, and there is this risk of a pen tester stealing your information, and you may be ending up with the loss of your trade secrets and so on. So this is again one of the reasons why you want to look at all these different aspects of pen testing and sit down with your pen testers and sign all these necessary legal documents and doing your due diligence and due care so that you don't end up with some of these unintended consequences.